This is fenced in to keep the chickens and the dogs out. And I am not big on weeding, as you can see. A big part of my gardening strategy has to do with making sure that the ground is kind of covered. So I feel like my garden is a lot like the way I run the rest of my life. It's fruitful, but it's chaotic. So here goes. But I'll show you kind of what I'm doing and then what I also plan to do. So it's not a very large space. I've got a row of potatoes here. I have my kale and lettuce. I just took out some lettuce that was bolting and got damaged by our extremely intense rains here a few days ago. And then I've got some squash, and then this is a mix of beans and beets. And that's all I've got. I've got a big old volunteer sunflower that's just getting ready to bloom. So kind of the strategies that I use for growing is I started all of these guys, all of the lettuce and all of the kale from starts that I had started in the greenhouse, and we kind of have to do that here. I'm sure that there are people who've had success if you just seed really thickly, but I've had a lot of trouble. We've got a lot of insects here. We're over in Upper Greenlaw, and it's warmer, and so the bugs come out earlier, and we have trouble with earwigs and cutworms in the spring, and they just come through and they eat everything as soon as it comes up. So usually I have another video I'll show you. Usually I'll go ahead and plant them, and then I'll put one of these solo cups around them. And it's a problem with chard because that gets a little too wide, but it works just fine with the kale and the lettuce, and keeps them from getting eaten down before they have a chance to really get going. Now I probably still got, I'll come out and throw diatomaceous earth on these guys probably once a week still, but once they get big enough that they can kind of handle getting eaten a little bit, I don't worry about it as much, especially once monsoons come. It's kind of like you'd have to come put diatomaceous earth out every other day. So I can kind of show you how I do my watering. So I just have a soaker hose that goes through the middle of all my beds, and so I just hook that up to a hose, and I've got that, I hook it up to a timer, and then I can either set that on automatic or I can turn it on and off whenever I want it to water. And when it's hot and dry, I usually water every 2 to 3 days, for like an hour or two, depending on how hot and dry it is and whether or not I am starting new seeds. I just seeded this area with turnips. I had all of my turnips eaten by what are they called? Flea beetles this spring, and I just pulled them out because they weren't doing well enough and they were attracting more bugs, I think. I'm gonna leave these lettuce to go to seed so I can collect seed for next year. See here, I actually for the first time went ahead and started my squash from some starts that I grew in the greenhouse because I had too many of them, so I just put them in, and I covered this guy with one of these hot caps. I don't know where you buy these. I pulled this out of a trash heap, but it's been fantastic. I just put a frisbee over the top of it when it freezes, and it survived the frost and it's doing great. You could probably have a plant this size from seed. They tend to do better from seed, it appears, but this guy's doing good. I've gotten a couple of zucchini off him so far. I think that somehow my water line failed in here because I had a bunch of stuff dry up, so I went ahead and pulled those beets out. And I've reseeded this area, and now that it's raining, I don't think it'll be a problem. But I've got volunteer potatoes. I planted onions along the edges, and then obviously I've mulched. I don't put my mulch down until my starts are up, usually about this high in the spring, because the bugs really like to live in it in the spring, and it makes it harder for me to find the cutworms to dig them out and feed them to the chickens and stuff. But I'm starting to get a few green beans. We've been eating beets off and on for a little bit. I tend to not pull out any of my edible volunteers. I am planning to put down another one of these, or some more flagstone. So eventually this will all be flagstone down the middle here, and that will keep fewer weeds from growing in here, and it'll also make it so a lot of these root systems are being kind of protected, mulched, heated by the stones. I do often put rocks in with my plants when they're young too, behind them, and it radiates heat at night, so that kind of helps keep them warm. I've had that save plants from frost before. So let's see. Anything else I want to cover? How I garden. So something that, for an example, this side, so I put down probably 3 inches of 50-50 compost manure mix on my soil. This half of the garden, I went ahead and tilled it. This half I did not. This half seems to be doing better. So it was kind of an experiment. This appears to be working better. So I'll probably not till my garden. I did loosen it. I used a pitchfork and I loosened the soil before I went ahead and seeded it. Seems to be working pretty well. So I'm hoping we've got some blossoms. I'm hoping we're gonna start getting some more green beans in the future. Oh, I also use these guys as heat sinks as well. I don't really like to throw things away, so I'll go ahead and take the milk jugs out and fill them with water and put them next to the plants, and that seems to get them going a little faster. And then if we get real cold weather, then it seems to protect them from freezing as well. Let's see. Now over here I've got my hopefully soon to be mango blue Hubbard squash. I started this one in the greenhouse too, and I had too many of them again. And nobody wanted to buy it. It was a little orphan squash, so I went ahead and planted it kind of in the corner, hoping that it would grow up and that I could flip it over the fence here. But it appears that the elm trees are really liking how I'm watering the garden, so they grew up faster. So it's climbing up the elm trees. I'll just keep directing it that way so it doesn't end up taking over the garden, and hopefully we'll get some squash. I think we've got some baby squash flowers in here somewhere. We'll see. They look like they're mostly males at the moment.